Come on, buddy. Oh, all right. Nice trout. Yeah, I'll take a trout like that all day long. It's a nice fish. So there are all sorts of haters and pundits that just beat down Euro nymphing or tight lining, check nymphing, whatever you want to call it. And I know a ton of those folks have never done it before. What I'm gonna do today is I'm only gonna fish jig streamers. And this is something that I think everybody can agree on, that streamer fishing is pretty much badass. You get above average size trout. You're looking for the fastest and strongest fish in the population typically that are tackling bait fish and have the energy to chase. Except with a tight line rig, we can do a whole bunch of different stuff. We can twitch it, we can strip it, we can dredge the bottom, we can slide it through the rocks. We can make a streamer so easy for the trout to grab that it can't help but pick it up. But then we can also rod twitch it, we can cast it, let it sink and strip it. We're just gonna go fishing today, and I will share a few of the tips and tricks I have for using a Euro, way overused term, or a tight line rig with just simple monofilament and some of these sexy looking jig streamers like this to try to catch some nice trout, and do so in a way where those fish are picking it up hard and we're getting some good tight line grabs. And it's a great technique for the do-it-yourself angler. You could do it on foot, or you can actually do it from a boat. When I do it from a boat, I don't like to use a nymph on there because I think that's like one notch. It should be illegal, actually. It's so effective. But we'll fish on foot a little bit. We may even fish from the boat a little bit. But that's what we're up to today. Jig streamer fishing on a tight line rod. There it is. That happened quick, first cast. This thing about streamers is they will gobble them up. Not a real big fish, but I do got to admit, like fishing, you're gonna fish smaller streamers with this kind of rig. It's kind of fun being able to fish streamers and still get a good like number of trout. I'm making a mess of this. My son's filming and swimming all over the place. There we go. Yeah, that's a pretty solid trout, actually. I thought it was a little smaller than that when I first hooked it. So that fish took right on the drop. So basically I put that fly right up on the bar in the shallows there, and was just letting that little streamer just flutter, perfectly hooked in the upper lip. Just letting that fly hit the bar, and it was just basically fluttering down the bar, really fishing it much like a nymph. I didn't have any tension on it or anything at that point, but we'll throw in there, we'll see if we can get another one. But that was actually, the fly was still kind of sinking and trickling down the bar. The fish picked it up really early in the presentation. All right, got another one here. Just hooked him up. Come on. Get in there. All right, beautiful. Nice fish. Caught that one on a black jig streamer. I switched colors, and yeah, got him on a black jig streamer to get him up right in the current and let him out of there. Cool. So that one ate in a little bit different manner. Last one, that bug was kind of trickling down the bar, and here's that black jig streamer. I'll link these flies in the video description, but that one ate right when the fly was breaking free from the bottom. So one thing I want to explain about this type of fishing and why it's just fundamentally different. Let me put my net away. You can keep rolling, I'll just edit all this out. What's fundamentally different about this type of streamer fishing is we're fishing the fly from the bottom up. So your presentation, it's gonna look something like this. I pop it out there, I lift it to get it all straightened out, I dip it to find the bottom, and then I'm gonna lead, which is putting a little bit of tension and making that fly pull or work downstream. And when that jig streamer encounters obstacles, because I've got tension, it pops right over the rocks. It's really cool. So it just kind of pops over it, then I'm fishing that layer of water right along the bottom. When a fish sees a critter, and that could be a nymph or a streamer, in this case it's a little sculpin or a crayfish, maybe a leech or a minnow, whatever it is, chances are it's probably living in the rocks in the substrate. You gotta be kidding me. Oh my gosh, that is hilarious. Are you joking? My fly was hanging in the current. I guess it pays to have your fly in the water. So, let's get this guy. Let's get this guy netted right here. That was awesome. Boy, I guess we probably don't need, if we're fishing there where Joe is, we don't need any of his advice. They just bite while your fly's hanging in the water. You know what's funny is I just switched to this black. I switched from the kind of the modeled minnow version of this. I think it's the Croston's Euro minnow jig. What, dude, free trout. Yeah, I'm gonna throw that streamer right back out there in the same spot. We'll see how that goes. The fishing's actually been pretty slow. That was like a miracle. That was divine intervention trying to save my video for today. We've got a handful of fish, but have not been like that. But what I was explaining is your streamer is gonna start on the substrate. Your critter, whatever you're fishing, whether it's a leech imitation or a minnow, a crayfish, whatever. If the trout sees it come from the bottom and then break free from the bottom and then it enters the water column, that is way more realistic than a fly that's thrown out and starts the top and then sinks down halfway into the water column, which I would describe as traditional streamer fishing with either a weighted streamer or sink tip. And that works awesome. That can work really, really well, but you're fishing exclusively to very aggressive fish. With this, when I put this fly on the bottom and I sink it down and then I pull tension to it, either with a forceful downstream lead or a cross lead or whatever I'm doing to make sure that streamer is streamlined out, I'm fishing for every fish. I'm fishing for fish that are lazy. I'm fishing for fish that are aggressive. I'm fishing for fish that are hungry, even fish that aren't really that hungry, but I make it so easy to have this bait fish or this leech or critter wander by because they're seeing it either in the substrate or right when it breaks free. And the fish before that last one that sacrificed itself for the good of the order, that fish ate right when that fly broke free. So as I was fishing down, I'm attempting to be in contact and keep my fly in contact with the bottom. And then in every presentation, I get to about a 30 to 45 degree angle down, and then the current just picks up the fly, and when that fly breaks or lifts from the bottom, that's very important at that moment because those trout in that surrounding, say, 5-foot area just saw a critter, a streamer, little jig sculpin or leech or whatever, come right from the bottom up into their little space just off the bottom. And if you're the first trout that can tackle that thing when it breaks free from the bottom, that trout's a happy trout, and that initial break is really important, and that's what's fundamentally different as we're working from the bottom up rather than from the top down. When it comes to flies, there's a big variety of different jig streamers, and all of these sink fast, but they're relatively sparse with the exception of that big green monster right there, the meat sweats. But that Croston's minnow jig right there on the left, the Soccer Mom, another fulling mill jig, I can't remember that, and the jiggy fry. Those sink fast, they're sparse, they're pretty easy to cast, and they all ride hook up because of the jig. And then if I had to choose one tippet, I'd use that 4X from Scientific Anglers. Although often with the smaller jig streamers, I prefer 5X because you have so much more control and they sink faster. One thing I didn't mention yesterday, we were on the river and singularly focused on fishing streamers. Wanted to kind of show that off and give people an outlet that want to get into Euro nymphing, but are afraid their friends might make fun of them. And they need to understand that you can catch fish on streamers with these rods and setups as well. So we didn't show this, but I want to show you a little hack. So I've got my rig here. I've got a Lamson Guru 5+ HD reel. I've got a 25-pound slick shooter for my line because it makes a good space shooting line for when I single-hand spay and streamer fish with this. Some cider material, that's just funny colored 1X material down to a tippet ring right here. And then I've got 5 feet of 4X tippet It's got a couple of junctions in there down to a tippet ring. So this is a little itty bitty tippet ring right here. Now, if I were throwing nymphs, it would look something like this. I would have an anchor nymph on here, and I would bounce this along the bottom and catch fish at will, maybe. Sometimes it feels like that, sometimes it doesn't. But if I want to switch from a nymph to a streamer, I can simply cut that unit off with those 2 flies. There's 2 flies right there, and I lay those carefully in my tackle bag, wherever I'm putting them. If you take care of that system, it makes it really easy. So then I can take my jig streamer, that's a jiggy fry, and I can put my jiggy fry on there, and then I can work the streamer. I could cast it across a back eddy, across a pool. I could swing it, try to catch fish on a streamer for a few minutes, and then really quickly just cut that streamer off. And if I took care of this system, 1 knot, and I'm back to nymphing, and I can switch back and give them the 1-2 punch, double nymph rig, streamer rig, and vice versa. So very easy to switch back and forth between those 2 setups. I'd be lying to you if I said this was going to be an advantage all the time. One, your friends are going to make fun of you, which is never fun. They're going to call you a Euro dweeb, and the only way you can catch fish is Euro nymphing, and blah, 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 blah. Trust me, I've heard it. But this is streamer fishing. And again, that's cool. That's badass. We love fishing streamers. But it's not going to be an advantage all the time. I'd be totally fibbing you if I said this was an advantage for presenting streamers all the time. Number one, it's not great for coverage. This is close quarters combat. We're going to have fish within 30 feet of us or so. It's great. It's a great for like a surgical presentation when we need to split narrow chutes between rocks where there's branches, and we have to be very articulate, very accurate with our streamer, and we can get it very close to the fish. So if you fish in jungles with lots of sticks and logs and branches and things like that, where we're reaching over the top of a boulder and pocket water and that kind of stuff, this is awesome for that. If you need to cover large amounts of water and you're, say, a drift boat fisherman, or you're fishing big western rivers, there's presentations probably better suited to that. But I absolutely love it. I'm hooked on it. I think it's a really cool way to fish, and I think it's very empowering for the do-it-yourself angler. Other disadvantages, you're not going to be able to throw big streamers. Now, I'll throw some number 8s and some pretty big buggers, but more of this number 12 type bugger is going to be what you're fishing. But you can fish it on very light tippet, which gives you extremely good control when you're fishing light line. So that's, I would say, an advantage. But it's not going to be the end all for all your fishing. You'll miss that traditional fly casting of seeing that fly line unfurl at 50 and 60 feet. And sometimes we cast just for the hell of it. And I'm full victim to that too. The cast is very addicting. But if you're looking for a good tool for presenting streamers in those close quarter situations, a tight line rig is pretty deadly. When you approach the water with a single streamer, it's not going to be a whole lot different than say other types of fishing. In a piece of water like this, so this is probably like nationwide average for wade angling right here, this size of channel. What I like to do is I'll start working upstream. So I'll start at the bottom and I'll start working the near half of where I think it's fishy. So I'll just cast up, and we'll talk more specifically about how the presentation works in a different segment. And then I'll keep working my way up. And I'll fish a little bit. Maybe we could get a fish on video. When you're narrating things, there he is. Had one right there. When you're narrating things, sometimes you're distracted just enough that it's hard to get the fish. So I'm gonna work up the inside, and I'm gonna keep working upstream, all the way to where I feel like I'd be at the top. Boy, that would have been good. That was a snag right there, but that felt great. So what I would do here, if we were gonna film this whole thing live, it would take too long, but I'm gonna work up the inside, fishing the near half the river all the way up here. And then I've got that really juicy cut bank over on the other side where I've got flooded grass and a couple of boulders. That's really the juice box right over there. But I'm gonna approach it by working up the inside, and then I'm gonna cast over all the way across to the outside, and I can enjoy good contact fishing and a little jig and a little cross lead, but then I can swing that fly all the way across the river on my way back, which would look something like this. I would just basically cast across. I would get my rod up. I would get a little bit of contact fishing like so. I'm in contact, meaning I'm tapping the bottom, and then I can just drop it really into a traditional streamer swing, and I can even jig my rod tip like that. But the bottom line is we're going up the inside, down the outside. That's gonna be our approach with a single streamer fly. So one tip I wanna give you that I think is really cool with a streamer when you're fishing like this, that as you're sitting wherever you're at right now that you might not appreciate unless it was explained to you, is there are a couple of sticks in the water over here. There's a stick right there and right there. But there's likely fish right around those because it's good holding water. But if I just dead drift or strip something across there, I'm likely to hit them. But I can take and I can watch my sighter and I can lift my fly right over those sticks and then drop it right in behind, right into the pocket right after those sticks. This system offers me very, very good control, and I have more fun, you know, delicately presenting a little streamer right around sticks and cover like that than I ever had with other systems, because I can drop it into spots that I would just normally either avoid or I would snag with a heavier streamer and a sink tip sliding through there. Let's talk presentation with this rig. So there are 3 major parts to the presentation, and the light's really flat. We can't see my sighter. I wish I had a professional film crew out here, but all I've got is my teenage son. He's pretty awesome, but we don't have any special camera gear, so you're not gonna see the sighter here. The first part of the presentation, I throw my fly up and I'm just gonna let it drop in, and that is gonna be a controlled drop under a little bit of tension. Same as we would throw a nymph or anything else. I fire it up and I lift or I strip in order to get my sighter up out of the water, and then I'm gonna drop my fly in very strategically. So there's gonna be a cast up, maybe a little line shot. There's gonna be a controlled drop with a little bit of tension. In the middle of the presentation is when I'm gonna be on contact. Okay, now the chief difference, and you have to understand this, okay, between presenting a nymph and presenting a streamer is the streamer has to have a firm lead or tension pulled to it. And if this is all foreign to you, go watch my how-to video on Euro nymphing. It's on the Reds channel. I filmed it about a few months ago. Because this has a tail, if I don't pull a firm lead to it, this tail could be doing anything. This could look like a big ball of crap floating downstream. What I need to do is I have to pull tension on it in order for that tail to stretch out and give the streamer some identity. So in the middle of your presentation, I can get this thing down, so I'm dropping it in, step 1, okay? I'm gonna drop. I'm lowering it in. I've identified that I've made contact because I can see my sighter start to slow down. At this point, I'm gonna put a firm lead on this right here, okay? I'm gonna draw my rod downstream. I can even draw it across, but I have to put some tension on it. Wasn't leading quite firm enough. I hit a stick right there. Okay, let's do it again. So I throw up, first part of the presentation, I'm stripping line, I'm getting it set up, I'm finding a point of equilibrium, I'm dropping it in, and now that I'm dropped in, I'm gonna tilt my rod, I'm gonna get my rod tip down ahead of that fly right there, and I'm gonna pull that fly downstream just like so. And essentially I'm gonna try to swim that little streamer right at the fish to make it very easy for that big trout to pick that fly up. The third and most important stage of the presentation is gonna be right here. I'm coming in and I've got my firm lead and I'm leading, but eventually I'm gonna run out of my ability to lead, and at that point, the current is gonna grab a hold of that tippet and the fly is gonna break free from the bottom and begin to lift and begin to swing. And I call that the break. And right at the break is when the trout is gonna see that critter break free from the bottom and originate right there in the rocks and the substrate. And trout love that. When they see that thing come from the bottom up, bam, they love to bite that. So you wanna make sure that the end of your presentation is this streamer is down here in that 30 to 45 degree range, whatever it happens to be, that I'm ready to gracefully lift that fly by holding my rod very steady and controlling that break and that lift and that swing, and doing so in a very graceful fashion. The other thing too is you're gonna move your feet around very methodically and very strategically, and as I work my way through a run, my my break point is gonna move all the time. And so as the break point moves around, I'm gonna trigger reactions from different fish. Or a fish that may have seen the fly in one setting, but then it sees it break and it can see right where that critter came from. And those trout trust that fly when they get to see the origin of their prey. So maybe you're already a Euro dweeb and you've got a rig that you take out and you fish with nymphs, probably catch a whole bunch of fish. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. People think it's easy, but there's definitely some nuance to it. I thought I was pretty good at it a couple years ago and began to realize I'm not so good at it. There's always something new. But one thing I love about fishing this with just a single streamer rig is I can cast and I can actually now strip my streamer, which is what I'm doing here. And I'll show a clip of this from the boat as well in back eddies. But when you're just hiking around and you're fishing, it is really nice sometimes to just give yourself a break from two nymphs and, you know, something that might tangle or something I can't really reach across the river and fish very effectively. But right here, I can throw right over into that slack back eddy, let that little streamer sink, give it a couple mends, and work that thing right through the back eddy right there, just like that. And then I can even let it swing, which is what I'm gonna do right now. So now I'm just doing a real patient, really gentle swing like that right there. So there's some like, there's some cool freedoms that you're allowed when you just have that single streamer on. And this technique isn't so you could just catch a whole bunch more fish. There are a lot of good ways to do that, and there are a lot of ways I can catch more fish. But sometimes I just need to have a little fun with a single fly, and I think that this is a nice break from those two fly rigs. Rod weights. What rod weight do I want for this? Well, if you're looking for an excuse to buy yet another fly rod, I'm gonna give you one, because a 4-weight Euro rod will move a streamer across the bottom much, much better, and stonefly nymphs included. I'm currently using a Beulah 10-foot 8-inch 3-weight, but it plays much more like a 4-weight. It does lack a little bit in the sensitivity realm, but it pulls big flies along really well and casts and twitches big flies extremely well. And it's really pretty and durable. So it's become a very trustworthy tool of mine on the water. But I would encourage you to look for 4-weights if you're gonna get serious about it, because the way the tip of a Euro rod works, and I'm just gonna use my hand, I have not found a better way to explain this, but when a heavily weighted fly touches the bottom, it provides additional load. And a light rod will just simply load up and the fly will stay on the bottom. A stronger Euro rod will load up as the fly hits the bottom, and the tip will spring it back up just off the bottom. So it'll sit there and it'll go tap, 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 tap. And a stronger tip on a heavier Euro rod will actually physically move the fly across the bottom for you. I've tried fishing big heavy flies on my 2-weight Thomas & Thomas, and it just lags and just bends down, and the fly stays on the bottom. And then I'm either snagged or I'm physically just pulling it across the bottom without the spring-loaded tip physically moving it. So 4-weights are great. A strong 3-weight would be fine. Bottom line is use what you've got. But if you really get serious about it and you're gonna move jig streamers and heavy stonefly nymphs, heavier rod is gonna be better for doing that. All right, it's pretty late into the evening now, and I switched up from one of those little jig streamers to a much larger streamer. And it's called the Meat Sweats by Rio. And if you ever had the meat sweats, you know what I'm talking about. Oh, come on, buddy, let's go. Get it, oh. He's too big for the net. I'm just a crappy netter. Oh man, come on. Come on. So I'm gonna shorten him up in the leader, and I'm gonna bring him upstream and try to swim him hard down. Oh, he does not want to do that. Normally they cooperate so well. Yeah, there we go. That filled that fish pond canyon net up. I think I might need a different version of this net for if I'm gonna be catching trout like this one. But yeah, let me get him on hook. That's a slab right there. God, the trout you catch on streamers just always seem to be just so healthy and strong. Let's get a little, I got my hands nice and wet. This water's so cold, the fish are just, they're great right now. Let him go. Beautiful. Okay, well, let me show you that streamer. The link in the video description as always, but I switched up. I went from those little streamers more midday to this meat sweats, and I've done a full review on the meat sweat streamer talking about why it's so different and just how it's designed. But there's a little weight on the belly, that white shiny part. I know it's not in perfect focus, we're a GoPro camera, but that keeps it riding with the hook up like that, so I can slither it right along the bottom without risk of snagging. But I switched to a number 8 meat sweats and was actually stripping and moving the fly pretty good. The dead drift, you know, just the slow leading presentation just quit working when it got a little bit darker, and they wanted to see something moving a little bit more. So more of a traditional streamer presentation. But yeah, super nice fish. I'm pretty stoked about that one.